It's pretty safe to say that 2020 was a significantly terrible year. I feel like a lot of AAA studios disappointed in more ways than one, but I was really surprised by how many smaller studios took the mantle and delivered some great games this year. Obviously, I have one or two big titles in this list, but for the year of 2020, I gotta hand it to the little guy for making some damn entertaining games that I returned to constantly. Anyways, I don't want to bore you for too long, so without further ado, let's get to my best games that I played in 2020. Carrion by Phobia Game Studio was a twistingly refreshing horror game that turned the tables on us. We were no longer the victims of the giant alien creature, but instead we were the ones causing terror and distress. We played the villain and it was an absolute delight. While falling a little short in the playtime department, Carrion is a total blast to play with its tight and fluid controls, solid gruesome pixel art design, and a John Carpenter-esque soundtrack. Carrion's story is also pretty solid, it's interesting throughout, and it ends in a satisfying way while also being ambiguous enough to justify a sequel. Overall, I really enjoyed Carrion. It was just a little too short for my taste, but that's because I was having such a great time playing it. Speaking of disgusting alien parasites that devour all that it sees, for as much flack as I gave this game when I first reviewed it, I can't deny that Animal Crossing New Horizons was my jam for pretty much the entire month it was released in. It probably helped that I was stuck at home all day with nothing to do, but regardless, the first month you're playing that game is really great. You set all these goals for yourself and what you're looking to accomplish in a day, and it oddly gave me something to look forward to during a time of great uncertainty. The game is visually very nice looking and the music for the most part is really pleasant. I have over 200 hours in this game because playing Animal Crossing was all I was doing throughout March and April. This game does lose a couple of points because it isn't as replayable as the other entries in the franchise to me, and I felt disappointed by the steps back the game took. I also felt like a lot of the newer mechanics added weren't implemented very well, and the game lacked really important quality of life features. Regardless, Animal Crossing New Horizons was a pretty solid entry into a series I really enjoy, and while it had many annoyances, I can't ignore how much of a great time I had with this game. Animal Crossing New Horizons is the video game equivalent of nature therapy, whereas the next game on my list, Doom Eternal, is the video game equivalent of Smash therapy. A practice in which you go into a room and destroy everything in it to help you relieve stress. It's for the type of people who feel a certain type of anger that only destruction and death will quench. The gunplay in Doom has always been the supreme example of excellent controls, sound design, and visual orgasm. Doom Eternal just cranks that up to 11 and gives us a pretty interesting story to couple with a new and amazing grapple hook that was so fun and well implemented, Halo Infinite tried to copy it. While Doom Eternal was a little more tedious than its predecessor with its ammo management, I can appreciate the developers trying something new with Doom to make every entry in the series unique. Doom Eternal was a really fun, violent, and blood-soaked time. I'm eagerly looking forward to getting my hands on Doom Guy's next killing spree. Games like Hearthstone really left a sour taste in my mouth when it came to online card games. Something about a new expansion every 4 months that makes the last expansion's cards irrelevant, and trickling new cards to the point where you need to spend hundreds of dollars just to keep up feels really sinister and gross to me. Hearthstone is easily one of the more expensive card games to get into these days, so I'm really happy to say that Legends of Runeterra isn't like that at all. This game handles monetization and RNG in a much healthier and less predatory way. This is a free-to-play card game that's truly free to play. Don't get me wrong, there are microtransactions, but for the most part, pay-to-play people and people who don't spend a dime on the game are pretty much on an equal playing field. You never really feel like you're playing catch-up if you don't have a fat wallet. Legends of Runeterra is also so rewarding to play, and I really like the mechanics for this game. The card art is really nice to look at, and I feel like the game is relatively well balanced for the most part. Riot Games has rightfully caught a lot of flack for how terrible their practices can be, but I feel like Legends of Runeterra is a really well made and refreshing entry in the card game genre that has gotten so greedy since other companies stooped to Hearthstone's level. Hopefully this game's success will make other games change their ways in order to compete. But if you're looking for a really fun, really easy to get into card game, then I highly recommend you check out Legends of Runeterra. Spelunky II was a huge surprise for me. I literally had no idea what the series was even about, but I just assumed that it wasn't for me. I gave the sequel a shot because of its multiplayer, and holy smokes, this game blew me away with how fun it is. The sheer randomness of Spelunky makes it a different experience every time you play. It's also an incredibly dense game with a lot of unlockable content, so you'll definitely get your money's worth. If you're into really challenging roguelike games with fantastic art direction and a great soundtrack, then I highly recommend that you give Spelunky II a chance. Ghost of Tsushima has absolutely ruined open world games for me. It's impossible to go back to a game like Fallout 4 or Far Cry 5 after having played one of the most interesting, diverse, and visually stunning game worlds I've ever seen. Sucker Punch really pulled out all the stops on this game, and Ghost of Tsushima is their masterpiece. Sure, there are some annoyances here and there like the enemy AI and stealth mechanics, but I can't deny how much I enjoyed Jin's story and exploring the world of feudal Japan. The combat is so buttery smooth and unique, I felt like it had the best progression of any RPG game I've played in 2020. Ghost of Tsushima was my favorite game for 2020 for most of the year, and it would have remained this way if I had not played the other two games on my list. So if you haven't played this game, please do yourself a favor and check this incredible game out, because you will not be disappointed. I picked up Risk of Rain in early November and I haven't been able to put it down. Okay, so this entry is technically cheating since this game came out last year, but to be fair, this game got its official 1.0 patch in 2020, so it fully released this year in my eyes, and holy crap is this game good. I really do feel like this game is the supreme example of what the roguelike genre is capable of. And that's no easy feat considering how many amazing games are roguelikes. Risk of Rain 2 caters to every kind of person, whether you're a speedrunner who wants to blaze through the gauntlet to get to the final boss, or someone who wants to power themselves up to the max before progressing because of this game's scaling. You basically get a timer that doesn't stop counting, and every couple of minutes it gets to the next level. Enemies get stronger, but they drop more gold and loot. Hypothetically, you could make a single run last forever, which would truly test your computer's limitations. If you're into challenging roguelike games and haven't played Risk of Rain 2, you're really doing yourself a disservice. This game has so much content, it's bound to give you hundreds of hours of playtime. Risk of Rain 2 honestly would have been my clear-cut favorite game of 2020 had another game not been released. Hades is as close to a perfect game that I've played this year. Its weakest element is the fact that it isn't really a strong roguelike compared to something like Risk of Rain 2, but even then, everything else about it is absolute perfection. I made an entire video about why this was my favorite game of 2020, and in that video I stated that Hades has it all. A fantastic narrative with amazing voice acting performances, incredible art direction, character and environment design, a kick-ass soundtrack, clean, responsive gameplay, and near endless replayability. The game serves as both a tough challenge to veterans of the roguelike genre, but also a surprisingly forgiving barrier to entry for newcomers. I love every single thing about Hades, and I truly feel like it's Supergiant's masterpiece. They've made some really amazing games in the past, and I'm interested to see how they could possibly top Hades in the future. I was actually really surprised by how many roguelike games made my list this year. I'm normally not a big fan of the genre, but these were the games that I was returning to this year when AAA games just weren't doing it for me. Ultimately, I feel like 2020 was an extremely disappointing year to be a fan of the big studios. I found their releases to be extremely mediocre, but at the same time, this year opened my eyes to how amazing indie games were, and I really regret not giving these games a chance earlier. Anyways, 2020 was a historically terrible year, and the sooner we can forget about it, the better off we'll all be. I look forward to 2021, and I hope it brings everyone success and happiness, and most importantly, I hope that 2021 brings us some really great games that we can discuss.